So I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, and it kind of ties back to what I was talking about in the introduction this morning. One of the great things about S4 is you get to meet really smart people in this industry, and Ralph has been to most, if not all, of the S4s. He came over, you know, he just didn't arrive on the scene with Stuxnet. He came over and did some great work on OPC server resource exhaustion 3 or 4 years ago, and a number of things. And I think the people that have attended S4 have established relationships with researchers like Ralph. So when I'm in Singapore and he sends me these emails telling me about Stuxnet that kind of are blowing my mind, I know I can believe him because I've worked with him and I know he knows his stuff. He's really my go-to guy when it comes to anything Siemens related. So we're really pleased to have Ralph here to talk about Stuxnet at a technical level that he normally can't talk about. Just in case you don't know, Ralph is the founder and CEO of Langnert Communications, which is a company in Germany that for many years has done ICS security consulting and research. So please welcome Ralph.
Okay, and during the next round about 30 minutes, I'll highlight some technical details of the Stuxnet attack code. And in order to give you an orientation what that means, let's go to the basics, to the architecture of the attack environment. So just a brief recap. The attack code that I'll discuss is the stuff running here on the controller. And down here you see the IT environment that Stuxnet uses, but as most of you will know, this was only used for dropping the payload. So I will only talk about the payload. The attack code is running on the controllers. As you know, the actual damage is done within the physical process. And this attack code right here is actually embedded in the wrapper, in this rogue DLL named S7OTBXDX DLL, which is the original name of the legitimate DLL, but it's renamed by Stuxnet. So this is the original DLL, and Stuxnet just installed the driver. And so how did we obtain the attack code? We did not hack into HBGary. We found a more easy and straightforward way. We extracted the attack code from the wrapper. It's contained in the wrapper. So in order to reverse engineer the attack code, you have to go through a 5-step process that you can see here. First, you have to isolate the rogue ladder logic in the wrapper. Then you have to decrypt it because it's encrypted by the attackers. Then you can decompile the code that you have, and you end up with step 7 code. You could call that source code because most of the time control systems engineers actually are hand programming in step 7. But when you look at that code, and you will see examples just a couple of seconds from now, it really doesn't make very much sense. So in order to understand the structure behind the attack, you have to decode it to pseudocode, which we did. And you will see, and most of the samples that I'll discuss are actually decoded to pseudocode. We used a C-like language because that's the easiest way to really make this type of code understandable. And finally, at the end of the day, we certainly want to understand what the attack code actually does. And since this specific attack is on an application level, it's not on a system level. It's not, the idea is not to crash a control system, for example, or to do some kind of denial of service. This is 100% application level. And so if you want to understand this, we have to understand the application. Unfortunately, it turns out that this application is classified. It's top secret. So Iran really doesn't tell us how they do it. But we can gather a lot of intelligence just by looking at the facts that are known about the structure of the targeted installation. And this is what we did, and you will see how that works. And to make that a little bit more transparent, so as I said, first we locate the rogue ladder logic in the wrapper, and what we get is this. And again, this is encrypted, as you can see. This is one module. Doesn't tell us a lot. But we can decrypt this stuff. And basically, that's not rocket science, because the encryption routine is coded in the wrapper. So we reverse engineer the encryption routine. The key is also contained. It's hard-coded in the wrapper. Oh my God, that's a vulnerability. So we just reverse engineer this and code it on a Windows PC. And then we are able to run the encrypted modules through that decryptor. And what we get is this. That looks much better, doesn't it? So the big difference is that we can run this through a decompiler. And then it looks like this. Hey, that's much better. That's step 7 source code that we got. And actually, it's the very same module that you have seen just before. By the way, the decompiler that we are using is in the public domain. This is an open source decompiler. We just had to make a couple of enhancements here and there because it's open source and it's not really professionally maintained. So we had to make some add-ons for example, that we are able to process modules that exceed 64K, which several of the Stuxnet modules do. And finally, having the step 7 source code, we can go to pseudocode. This is what you see right here. And this looks great, doesn't it? So this is something that we can try to understand. Certainly, what you don't see in the step 7 code is comments or symbols. So these are, the attackers were not that stupid, so they don't have any symbols there, so these were added by us. The big problem with pseudocoding is that you have to do it by hand. So this requires a lot of labor. But at the end of the day, we can get this, and this allows us to understand what the attackers are actually after. And I'll discuss this specific module within a couple of minutes. So now we have a code base that we can do our forensics on. And one of the most important questions that we had and wanted to answer was certainly, what is the target? We knew this is a directed attack, so how can we determine what the target is? As it stands today, I can say we know the target with a confidence level of 100%. It's not guesswork. It's not about 80 or 90%. It's 100%. And how is that possible? Let's have a look. One interesting experience was that most of our forensic results came not only from analyzing the code, but the data. So Siemens uses in their Step 7 products a very simple architecture where code is different from data, just like in the old times when you use assembly language coding on a PC. This is how it still is done on controllers. So you have not only around about 30 function modules, you also have a set of data modules. And the interesting thing is that when you look at these data modules, you don't see actual data, but you see the structures, how the code actually works on its data. And there are actually two prominent data blocks, as Siemens calls this, that Stuxnet is using. There are 8063 and 8061. And let's go to 8063. Here we go. Now, that's it. In it's in memory size, this is about 30K. The funny thing is, it really isn't that complex, because when you look at the structures, there are several things that pop out. For example, you always find these arrays, these two-dimensional arrays, where the code is working on something that uses 6 entries. So the number 6 is very, very prominent. And as some of you will know already, the plant layout in Natanz really uses the number 6 heavily. It's one of their magic numbers. Probably it has some kind of religious meaning, I don't know. But just to give you an example, the pilot fuel enrichment plant in Natanz, this is the above ground facility, it contains 6 centrifuge cascades. And we have reason to assume, or let's say we have some very good forensic evidence that in the fuel enrichment plant, this is the below ground facility with around about 9,000 centrifuges running, they're also using the number 6 to structure things. So this is a very easy result. But we can get much more intelligence on this. So, for example, we know that the first big array over here, the 16K array, this is one buffer where the attacker store the input process image. Then certainly what stands out is something like this, an array of 164 entries, and this is we have the 6 times. And by the way, if you multiply 164 by 6, you arrive at 984. Funny thing is, the cascades in Natanz actually do have 164 centrifuges. So we have a pretty good idea at this time that this attack code, but I forgot to mention, this is all about the 417 attack that I'm talking about. So some of you will know that there are 2 different digital warheads, and most of what I'm going to say is related to the 417 because it's the much more interesting and complex attack. So we know that this attack is operating on 6 cascades. And we see something else here. So, for example, we have this structure with 24 entries. This fooled us for several weeks because we thought it would have a relation to the plant configuration, but it doesn't. It's just a memory table that's used for indexing into another address table where I/O addresses are stored. But this is important here. This is the reason why it's highlighted in red. So we have other structures with 25 entries. And they're absolutely central for the attack. So the attack is not operating on an individual centrifuge level. It's operating on a cascade level. And some of the things they're doing, you will see that later, is messing with a structure of 25 entries per cascade. And then certainly we have this other magic number that's 15. And just to finish this up, you will see something else, another structure with the 25 that's central for the actual attack sequence. And here we got some other groups of 6, so they're obviously related. They make heavy use of timers, so they're timing their attacks up down to the microsecond level. But anyway, so the point was when trying to make sense out of this, it was clear that this would in some way be related to the actual plant configuration. So we tried to figure out what the actual plant configuration would look like and how we can relate this. And I'll go back to this in a second. Just to give you another idea of the other big central data block that is important for the analysis, that's 8061. And the funny thing is, those of you who have read Symantec's paper, for example, and who read our blog might say, wait a second, 8061 doesn't exist. That's true. But anyway, we do know the structure of 8061. So 8061 is one of the big mysteries in the whole Stuxnet puzzle because, again, as both we and Symantec figured out, it is definitely needed for the attack. Without its presence, the attack cannot execute. but it's missing in the wrapper, so it's not loaded by Stuxnet. Big question is this done by intention, or was it a fault by the attackers? Well, our theory is that it could actually be part of the legitimate application that's running on the control system. So it's not loaded by Stuxnet for the simple reason because it might already be there. And there is some supporting evidence for this because we have a pretty good idea of what DB8061 contains. This is what you see here. Actually, it's just one freaking big addressing table. It holds I/O addresses. And you would, with a high degree of confidence, you would find something like this in the legitimate application. Anyway, so we know by analyzing how the attack code accesses DB8061, how this data block is actually structured. And this is what you see here. Again, we have 6 big arrays, which would correspond to 6 cascades. And there are, and every cascade has different entries. So, for example, we have 2 entries with 100 or 2 groups of data with 164 entries, which would probably correspond to I/O addresses of individual centrifuges. Then we have 2 times 25. We have 1 entry with 30. That was a very big surprise. We have to work on this to make sense out of it. And we have several entries that correspond to some device with 3 units. So the funny thing is, we know by reverse engineering the attack code that these are all I/O addresses. Actually, the blue ones, which are used by the attack code, these are input addresses. So this is something where the attack code reads values from, and everything in red is output addresses. So these are actuators that the attack code actually talks to, that the attack code manipulates. So all this given, we have something to work with when trying to figure out what the attack is actually doing. Now the question is, how does this relate to what we know about the plant configuration in the TANs? And as it turned out, yes, you can establish some links here. It was actually not so difficult. When researching the open literature that had been published about the TANs configuration, I came across a publication from Alexander Glaser. He's a nuclear scientist working at Princeton. And Alex computed a cascade model for NATANs. Now, how was he able to do this? Because all this stuff is so classified. Well, the funny thing is that in 2006, the head of the Iranian nuclear program leaked to the press that they are doing their cascades with 164 centrifuges that they group into 15 enrichment stages. So a cascade actually is one big machine that's made up of several centrifuges, but they are grouped into what is called enrichment stages. And Akatsadeh, the head of the Iranian nuclear program, also told the press that they would use stage 5 as the feed stage. This is where the uranium hexafluoride is introduced. So this is the product end where your enriched uranium 3.5 enriched would come out, and here is the waste end where all your waste is gone. So you put in the UF6 here. Here is your product outflow, and here is your waste outflow. So this given, I thought, okay, this is my number 15. So how can I relate this to code? And actually, that was quite easy, because we have this great module 6075, and it's a freaking big module. It's one of the modules that exceeds 64K, and it doesn't contain any attack logic. It only contains initialization. So many hundred lines of code where the attackers just assign values to the variables. It goes on and on like this. And wait a second. What is this? What have we got here? This is very interesting and very easy to interpret. So they are assigning values to to variables that are going from 1 to 164, and the value ranges from 1 to 15. So you could also say they are assigning individual centrifuges to boxes, and the boxes are numbered from 1 to 15. So there's a direct link between the 164 and the 15, okay? And that's great, because that gives us something to work on. And if you look closer, it's not that good visible because this is in red here, but if you try to read this, you will see, for example, that this last entry with where the 15 is assigned, this is about centrifuge 161 to 164. So that's 4 centrifuges. 53 to 60, that's 8. To start with, on top here, that's 2. That's another 2. So I try to make sense out of these, and just punched in the numbers into my analysis tool. These are the same numbers that you have seen, just the delta. So 15 had 4 entries. Stage 14 had 8 entries. Then 12, 16, 20, etc. And let's draw a diagram for this. Looks like this. Wait a second, haven't we seen anything like that before? Yes, that looks like a damn belly-shaped centrifuge cascade. So, to make it more easy and appealing, what you see here is the allocation of stuff or centrifuges as used by Stuxnet. These are the red bars, and the blue bars are the ideal centrifuge cascade as calculated by Alex Glaser. Now, they're very, very similar, aren't they? Could that be a coincidence? Probably, but I don't think so. So the point is, the major difference between these two shapes is right here. And there is a very simple reason. By the way, the shape from Alex is reversed here. And this makes very much sense because, you know, the Iranians are reading and writing from right to left, the other way around. So this is why it's reversed. They're thinking it in reverse. The major difference is about the feed stage. But as it turned out, well, Akazadeh, this former head of the Iranian nuclear program, guess what? He just cheated a little bit here. You know, they do something, cheat, the Iranians. And this is another example. So he told the press, well, 5 is our feed stage, where it actually is 6. So if you would recompute the ideal centrifuge cascade, it would probably be very much like what we see in Stuxnet. And by the way, this pink line here is another data derived from the initialization module, and it clearly highlights the feed stage here. Okay, but a couple of weeks ago, I thought, this is not good enough for S4, because I'm talking to the best of the best, and they don't buy it. So I went back to the original evidence and did some further research, and I thought, well, let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to what we really know about Natanz. Actually, the president of Iran was polite enough to give us very good forensic evidence on his website. So these are official press photos that have been taken during a media tour back in 2008. So you can actually navigate to that site, www.president.ir, and you will find these photos, these high-resolution photos in their press material. So just looking at this from a forensics point of view, from somebody's point of view who is interested in figuring out how is the plant designed? What do you see? Well, it's very, very easy. What you see is that they group their cascades into 4 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the pilot plant. This is the real underground facility. 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. This is what you see on every picture. And then the president has also been kind enough to show us his SCADA screens. So after looking at the plant layout, I said, hey, wait a second, that's interesting, because the screens or the SCADA application that you can see here also shows 4 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, could it be that the green dots are in some way related to centrifuges? Or what would you think the green dots stand for? So let's have a closer look to this image, because it really tells us a lot. You wouldn't think so. You wouldn't believe it, but you will in a couple of seconds. If we take a closer look at this, then you will see some very funny irregularities down here. And this is something we are going to focus on. This is the very same image. It's just, I just enhanced the contrast. And then you can see what they have down below here. They have little markers inserted. Now, what could these markers mean? The fact is, if you just say, well, this is a grouping of these individual columns, then you can quickly determine that these columns are actually showing the different enrichment stages. Okay? Because at the very right end, you see 4 centrifuges in a group. Then it's 8. Then it's 12. Then it's 16. Then it's 20, 24, 20. These are the exact values that you have just previously seen in the graphic that I showed, derived from the Stuxnet values. So this is a 100% match. And the next thing that I did was, well, I said, now let's just put in the Stuxnet cascade shape into a cascade model. And let's see how this would look like. Actually, this is the table that you see here. So this is this is derived from the attack code in Stuxnet. These are identical up to here. So these are 24, 20, and then it peters out to 2 and 2. Now the funny thing is, again, this is a 100% match with what you see here. And the most telling evidence is, look at the missing dots here and here. Okay? Those are your missing dots. So this is constructed out of the Stuxnet attack code. It's a perfect match. 2 and 2. 2 and 2. So, I would say case closed in terms of determining the target. The next and last thing I would like to focus on is I would like to tell you something about the attack strategy that we can see in the code. And the bottom line is that the attackers put the emphasis on secretly controlling the facility. As I said in 2010, this is a stealth control system rather than an attempt to do one big blow. So let's see how this is supported by the evidence in the attack code. First, we were very surprised to see that the attack sequence is actually circular. Why is that surprising? Because it means that the attack is executed over and over again. Whereas I, as probably most other people, would have expected to see just one big blow. And when you're finished with that big blow, you don't need to go back there again. And I'll just going to explain how the state machine for the 417 attack code is structured. Again, this is our pseudocode. It's basically, it consists out of 8 states. But the funny thing is that states 2 to 6 are the real attack state. So this is where they're actually manipulating the controls. So in state 0, they're just staying put. They do nothing. They are just monitoring the process and waiting for the strike condition to happen, and then they move on. So again, state 0, this is the initial state, and they are checking the strike condition by calling 6064. We'll go to that in a minute. Then in the next state, they are recording the process image for 21 seconds. And this information is later used to fake the input process image for the legitimate control logic. Then they move to the real attack where they are manipulating the outputs. And this is stage 2 to 6. And important thing here is, if you look very closely, it always starts with 6065, where they are manipulating outputs. I'll show you that in a minute. And then they're faking the input process image. And then there is some additional stuff like check-in timers, etc., but only minor variations between the different stages. So let's move over to the next attack stage. But again, this is 6065, 6079. And then some additional stuff. Stage 4, 6065, 6079. Additional stuff like check-in duration. We were talking about durations within a couple of minutes. Stage 5, 6065, 6079. And stage 6, the final attack stage, 6065, 6079. So they're always calling these two functions, and then they do minor stuff around this. And they're finished in stage 7, where they're reinitializing the data and the logic. So first, let's have a look at the trigger condition. How is or when is the attack actually started? This is done again in 6064, and not so much code. What you can see here is where they actually calculate the major trigger condition, and it's basically done by checking a couple of timers. I'll explain that in a second. And this is the return value. So basically, we have 3 conditions, and when any 3 condition is fulfilled, because they're connected by logical OR, then the attack or then the state machine moves from 0 to 1, and the play begins. So funny thing is that the first return condition that you see here is quite puzzling, because it's just a checking of timers. And it says, well, if the cumulative number of these timers is equal or exceeding 297, then this is your strike condition. Funny thing is that they're counting this in days, so this condition could take up to a year until it is actually reached. Then they have another very funny condition. If this flag 28 is set in 8061, then the attack condition, the strike condition, is also fulfilled. Funny thing is, we really don't know what that means, because it also depends on whether your theory about 8061 is that it is a rogue data block, which would mean then that this would be kind of a debug flag that the attackers could deliberately turn on to start the attack sequence. If it's part of the legitimate code, it could mean some process condition that the operators have set, for example. But the real stuff is going on here in the middle. And what you can see immediately, that this is an awfully complex condition because it combines timers and it combines process values. And one of the bizarre things is that we have a criterion, for example, that at least one cascade must have a condition between 17 and 18 hours. You can see the details here. So it's actually not 17 and 18, it's 16 hours and 57 minutes to 17 hours and 59 minutes. So you can see the attackers are really specific on this. It's not just between 17 and 18 hours, so they want to have it in detail. And if all these conditions are met because they are connected by logical AND, then this is your major strike condition. You could also say, in a way, this is like, okay, when Jupiter is aligned with Mars and it's full moon, then we're going to strike. Or in other words, they are very, very precise. They want the process to reach one specific condition before they go to their work. Okay, so let's look at the attack, at the actual destructive sequence. So this is the main attack routine, which does the manipulations to outputs. 6065, you have seen that a couple of times in the state machine. And first they're constructing a set of pointers to talk to the IOs. Now, we do have a very good idea in terms of the structures that they're related to, the plant structures. We don't know the exact actuator type that they are talking to, but we do know, for example, that this one here, out2, base 3, underline out2, this is an output, an actuator that belongs to a structure that is there 3 times per cascade. So this gives us at least an idea what they try to achieve. And the funny thing is, so what stands out is that this attack sequence is operating in a loop from 1 to 25. So 25, again, is their major is the major device, or the major device that they're manipulating during the attack has 25 units. So what are they doing? They are checking, again, some conditions. You remember, the whole thing will only start if all these conditions with between 17 and 80 hours and 18 hours are met. If these are not met, they would never get there. But even when they get there, the condition checking goes on. So they're checking something like if this is unequal, if several values are not equal, and blah, 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 blah. If this is not true, they just don't do anything. They continue the loop. And if it is fulfilled, then the first step of the manipulations is reached. And it toggles 2 output bits in either in a 30 or 25 based structure. This is something very funny that you can see here. So there is another condition. If these values here, which correspond to some process values, if they are either both 1 or they are either both 0, then the bits are toggled from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0. Don't ask me what this actually means for the actuators. I don't know. It's just some detail that gives you an idea that these guys know the centrifuges better than the Iranians. I mean, they know everything. They know the timing. They know all the actuators, all the inputs. They just know this stuff by heart. Then let's see another couple of manipulations. Let's move to the next step within the attack routine. Funny thing is, before there is a chance to reach step 2, there is another check on specific conditions. And if these conditions are not met, we just skip the following steps. So we just move on in our loop from 1 to 25. And this is the way that it goes on and on. So here is step 2. Then we have another step, step 3. And again, always you have these condition checks. And if they are not met, the specific attack step is skipped. And this goes down to the last of our 4 steps, where in this case they are writing to 3 actuators in a structure that has 3 entries per cascade. So again, what does this tell us? It's not just applying raw power. It is very, very specific. You could probably think this could be a little bit over-sophisticated. And at least this is my impression. But what you can clearly see is that the emphasis of the whole attack is on disguise. It's on a long-term infiltration, long-term damage that the victim doesn't recognize, that the victim would attribute to mechanical problems as they have experienced for the last decade or so, since they are playing around with these centrifuges. Funny detail here, an important detail. Now let's look at the input process image faking. This is done, if you remember, in 6079. 6079 is actually very short. This is the whole code of 6079 that you see here. And again, if you remember, this is called in stages 2 to 6, so in every of the attack stages where the attackers are actually manipulating outputs. So what you see here, they are not doing really much in 6079. The real work is done in another function module, that's 6048. Let's look at this. They're just doing some pointer arithmetic. And here is the function call where the rubber meets the road. And that's not nice. That's not good. That's bad, because it's way too easy. So let's elaborate on this here a little bit. What you're seeing here is one of the biggest problems in ICS security globally. Because what the attackers are doing is they are faking the input process image, which means they are disconnecting control logic from reality, from what the sensors are actually delivering. By the way, you can also do this with safety logic, which then means your safety logic is disconnected from reality. Folks, let me tell you, this is bad. And it's even worse to see how easy this is done, because this is the whole code that you need. And the thing is that the vendor in question had made a decision to make the input process image read-write rather than read-only. So we are talking about a classic design flaw. There is absolutely no reason why the input process image should be read-write. No reason. But it is in technical terms. And this is something that the attackers exploited. So this is a design flaw. Funny thing is, and I'm pointing this out because we discussed the vulnerability stuff just earlier, funny thing is, this could be fixed easily. the vendor could have fixed this a year ago by just making the input process image read-only. They were just treating it as another block of memory where you can dump data in, just using a block move. This could have been fixed a year ago, but the vendor chose not to. The vendor chose to be silent about this. Well, funny thing is, DHS also chose to be silent about this. And this is one reason why, forgive me, but I don't treat DHS as serious any longer in this department, because this is one of, as I said, the biggest problems we presently have in ICS security, and they're just not addressing it. And, and if I am your attacker, well, let me tell you something. I would not bother to discover any buffer overflows in your product. I just go to design flaws because I know that I can use those reliably. So please, when discussing vulnerabilities, please learn from Stuxnet. Please learn what the real pros do. There is zero vulnerability that has been exploited by Stuxnet that would qualify as a bug. It's all design flaws. This is how the pros do it. And please let's not discuss vulnerabilities that are only going to be exploited by incompetent attackers. This just doesn't make any sense. Let's look at the nasty stuff. And you will certainly be able to guess, even without a lot of Siemens experience, that this can be copied reliably. Eric, is that true?
Yes.
Thanks. This was Eric Byrus, one of the big voices in our field. To round this up, these guys are obsessed with disguise. I think it's interesting and amazing. I never thought that they would really follow this approach to the level of detail that you have seen. And the idea is to inflict damage by death by 1,000 cuts rather than a clean shot right between the eyes, which is probably the approach that DoD had chosen. So this is another piece of evidence that suggests to me that this was not a DoD job. They just do things differently, so this looks much more like the CIA. One final interesting detail, this whole approach by putting the emphasis on disguise, this is also supported by another finding from one of the best nuclear scientists in the USA. This is Scott Kemp. He also works at Princeton. And he has discovered that the drive speed that the 315 attack code sets when doing the manipulations is actually the specific speed that you would need to introduce the maximum rotor fatigue, which again tells us the idea is not to break as many rotors as quickly as possible. It's just to make it look like mechanical problems. Because if you're doing this, your rotors will actually not crack during the attack. They will crack probably a couple of weeks later, driving the maintenance guys crazy. So this is another supporting detail of evidence, and that's it. So anything you want to ask, if we have the time left.
We'll make sure everyone gets their full lunch hour, too, to enjoy the weather. But thank you so much, Ralph. That's the technical meat we promised at S4, so you made me not a liar. Go ahead.
Eric Byers, Tofino Security. So I just want to check one thing. You're saying that both the 315 and the 417 code was likely active because there's a lot of rumors around that the 417 code was not active.
Okay, so my point is I don't see any good reason that would support the theory that the 417 code is inactive or intentionally disabled or that it could not run. So I think that Symantec has created the impression the 417 code just cannot run. It's incomplete, it's unfinished. And you could think about the 417 attack code as, for example, a laptop computer, where when you hear, well, this is unfinished, this just can't work, you would think, well, the keyboard is messed up and the screen is just showing wrong colors, etc. But it's not like this. It's like a perfectly well-designed laptop without a mouse pad. But the thing is, you can still use the laptop, for example, using an external mouse, which could be the case in respect to data block 8061. So our theory is that both attack sequences are operative. But by the way, don't get me wrong, this is not something I believe would be substantial to answer, because we will, in any case, we will never be able to really get a realistic idea what happened in Natanz, because we don't know the environment. So, for example, we have no way to establish that the 315 code actually executed in Natanz. We just don't know this. But the thing is, and this is why I think the forensic work like this is important, we still can get a very good idea about what the attackers intended to do. What they really achieved, we don't know. We just have to guess here. But we can be very sure about what they intended to do. Zach.
So obviously there's lots of questions here. This is Zach Tudor from SRI. Do you think that whoever crafted this underestimated the ability of the community to understand and point out the flaw here? You know, they might have hoped to be able to perform this magic for at least several more months or years without being discovered?
Yes, I would think that's a valid proposition, because the attackers made some funny mistakes. Let me say just this. So, for example, when we go back to the architecture, or to the environment of the attack, one of their worst mistakes. So I'm getting you. You're looking for ways of improvement for the 2.0. One of their worst mistakes was to simply rename the legitimate driver DLL and just introduce this new DLL right here. Very, very easy to spot. And then what's probably even worse, when this is running in a WinCC environment, this wrapper here is probing the target every 5 seconds. So this was one fact that allowed us to get an idea of what was going on within the first day of our lab analysis. The first day we knew this is a targeted attack. It's operating at a control system application level. So let me tell you, so I look at the camera. Guys, this was not cool. This was just too easy. So think about this for the 2.0. This was way too easy.
Ralph, you mentioned at the end of the presentation that you thought this could have been addressed a year ago by just making the input process read-only. So does that mean today the input process still has that same issue?
Sure, absolutely.
So when you hear son of Stuxnet, Stuxnet clone, all that, still there?
Absolutely. And my worst case is not to see some nation-state actors exploiting this. I mean, they will certainly try to get advantage of something like that. My worst-case scenario is some hacker just gets the idea and just builds a worm who is actually exploiting this. And by the way, this gives me the opportunity to point out one very important aspect here. Many people are under the completely wrong impression that you would need to have access to Stuxnet source code in order to do copycat attacks. This is completely absurd. You don't have to. All you have to do is you have to understand the concepts. So, for example, once that I have understand, oh, wait a second, the input process image is read-write. Well, I don't need your source code. I can do it on my own. So this is my worst-case scenario, that we are going to see worms, viruses from from the usual suspects who are just playing around with this.
Andrew West, SCADA consultant. Ralph, I would assert, my working life has been in firmware development in these kinds of products. And I would assert that in many applications, you need to be able to modify the input image in order to perform the application. So simply saying that to make that a read-only image would certainly protect against this kind of issue, but it would also disable many applications that these kinds of devices are used for. So it's not as simple as just saying turn it off.
Well, wait a second, Zach. Allow me to disagree. And I'll tell you why. You know, there had been a similar discussion in the IT community many, many years ago, where some people like Björn Strustrup argued, well, we have to take some of the freedom away that a programmer has when using the C programming language. You can use all these pointers, etc., and you can do, and you're going to end up with some very, very nasty stuff. So, for example, in a modern programming language like Java, you just can't use pointers, period. And certainly, if you go back to history, there have been legions of programmers who objected, no, this takes our freedom away, and we can't program the stuff that we need to do as good any longer. And history has shown, that's nonsense, you can. You just have to use a different approach. And this is, I believe, one of the most important lessons that we have to bring over to the public and to people like you and Zach. That certainly, if you enhance the security posture, there will be drawbacks. Yes, and not every improvised solution by somebody who just intended to quickly fix a problem to save the day will work any longer. Yes, that's true. But if then, on the other hand, I have the confidence that my input process image actually shows something real, it might be worth the fuzz. Or to put it in another way, if I can trust my input process image, you could say, well, just forget about this product. I'm sorry, Siemens, but I think this is really not acceptable.
I spent a few years in quality assurance, and I'm quite interested in this subject. I'm particularly fascinated by the idea that quality assurance was performed on the code in Stuxnet. There was obviously a lot of testing done, a lot of hours of coding went into creating this. Would you care to comment on the level of quality assurance that went into Stuxnet and compare and contrast that with the quality assurance practices of the vendors?
Okay, so I think the last part of the question is easy to answer because the vendors that I work with or that I have some affiliation with in my work, they don't do this level of quality assurance. I'm sorry, that's the reality. In case of Stuxnet, we learned several things from doing all this reverse engineering. And I think all of you will now be able to agree to this by looking at the level of detail that they're using or that they're talking to specific actuators, etc., for specific amounts of time. We know positively that they had a test facility. So this code is so complex that there would be no chance, zero, to get this running without testing. So they must have had a testing facility. And I would say, from looking at the code, so they must have done some pretty good quality assurance, but not in, it's not divided equally. So there are parts of the attack that are obviously thoroughly tested, very well designed. Some even are obviously structured in a way which makes it much harder to reverse engineer. Even if it looks easy now, I can tell you it's a pain in the ass to actually go to produce the pseudocode. But there are other parts of the attack which obviously, like what I pointed out previously, were written were written in a rush. and nobody cared to really evaluate this and say, well, just do it a little bit different, and then we have a higher probability of achieving our goal, etc. So and this gives us another forensic insight here that obviously this is the work of multiple teams.
I had a question about the protecting the code pages, the memory read-write, and how you viewed that as a design flaw. I'm not familiar with some of the systems or the hardware that they run on, but I've seen modern exploits, and it's very common for them to change the code page. Like, for example, they'll change the code page of the heap from read-only to read-execute just by NT set information process, or on Linux mprotect. And I'm wondering if the same technique could just be used to change a read-only code page in memory to read-write and just execute this attack over again, even if the memory page was changed?
I would think that there are technical ways to make this happen in a secure manner, but certainly you would have to discuss this with the Siemens engineering department. The one thing that puzzles me most at this time is that the vendor in question has never wanted to talk about this in public, so they just are in state of denial.
Okay, we're going to have one more question because people serving lunch are probably very upset with me, so Zach, finish us.
So I get to talk on this sometime and talk about your work. And one of the questions that I ask audiences, and you have more experience talking to people about this than almost anyone. So what do you think the ultimate lessons from Stuxnet are? You mentioned some of them. And who's actually getting it? And I think that the two separate communities may be a little bit askew. One thing that I see is that this is really a complicated attack against a manufacturing recipe. I think critical infrastructure people are up in arms about Stuxnet, but a lot of people at other levels should really be very concerned as well.
Yes, absolutely. But certainly I wouldn't be able to give you my answer, let's say, in 3 sentences. But one point here, there are certainly some issues that stand out because of their priority and that people still haven't got, I mean, in the field. And I think it's surprising, and it's worth the effort to recap these. So, for example, big lesson number 1, sophisticated attackers go after your engineering systems. This is something that hasn't been addressed or even understood in many, many industries. Most of the time people think I have to secure online communication, online manipulation of set points, and I'm secure. That's not the case. With Stuxnet or after Stuxnet, your engineering systems are top priority for security. Second lesson, everybody will agree, your sophisticated attacker doesn't need online access. So every time you still hear, but our facility is not connected to the internet, you know that this person has no clue what he's talking about. Okay, I think I'll leave it with these two.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ralph. That was tremendous.
Thanks.
Okay, so lunch is a little bit of a walk. You go out towards the front door where you came in, go up the stairs, and then back towards the bay. The S4 regulars will show you the way. And why don't we try to get back here at 1:30 if we can. Thanks.